everybody. My name is David Hodges, and along with Randy Kallinen, my co-counsel, we represent the family of John Barnes. I appreciate everybody coming out this morning. I want to tell you, first of all, a little bit about who John Barnes was. And I have his picture. This was John Barnes. John Barnes, at the time of his death, was 39 years old. He was a father, he was a son, he was a husband. I also want to tell you a little bit about the person who took his life. His name was Ryan Gardiner. Ryan Gardiner was a police officer with Houston Police Department. Officer Gardiner had used his taser more than any other police officer on the force. Officer Gardiner, in a short time, relatively short time on the force, had been involved in 2 shootings of unarmed citizens prior to the shooting of John Barnes. Now, on August 1st of 2009, John Barnes was living in the apartment with his wife and her children, took the kids to the pool. They enjoyed a nice afternoon at the apartment complex pool. Later on that evening, John and Karen got into a squabble like a lot of people who live together do. So at that point, he said, you know what? I'm going to go to my parents' house. Put some stuff in his car. He turned back to give Karen some money so she could pay a bill. And at about that time, Officer Gardiner was patrolling through the complex. He lived at the complex as a courtesy officer in exchange for either reduced or no rent at all. As he patrolled through and he saw that Karen and John were talking to one another, he came up to them and he told John, get on the ground. Now John, who was working as a tow truck driver and spent many years working as a tow truck driver, working very closely with police, was himself a former member of law enforcement. He was a jailer with the Morgan County Sheriff's Department in Tennessee. He was familiar with justified use of force, and he knew his rights as an ordinary citizen. And so when John objected to getting onto the ground, Officer Gardiner attacked him. Officer Gardiner, the smaller man, struggled to get the bigger man, John, onto the ground. And they struggled. Meanwhile, witnesses started to watch what was going on, including a neighbor, including those in a pickup truck that were starting to exit the apartment and saw what had happened, and including Karen herself, who watched what went down. John was able to push Gardiner off of it and started walking towards the car. As John started walking towards the car, Officer Gardiner pulled out his gun and he pointed it at him. And at that point, John saw the gun and he kind of leaned against his car and he crossed his arms and he said, what are you going to do? Shoot me? And raised them as witnesses, multiple witnesses have confirmed, and said, then shoot me. Now obviously he wasn't serious about that, but Officer Gardiner went ahead and obliged him and shot him 5 times. He shot an unarmed man 5 times who had his hands up like this. Once again witnessed by multiple people. John falls to the ground bleeding. At that point, Karen's horrified and she asked for help, which Gardiner refused to let anyone help John as he bled out on the pavement. Officer Gardiner delayed getting paramedics to the scene, and of course John bled out while he waited in vain for help. Afterwards, John's body laid on the pavement for most of the night. Now, investigation was conducted into this by the police department. The Internal Affairs Department conducted their own investigation. They took statements, yet they've done nothing to Officer Gardiner. And today, as far as we know, he still walks the streets, still patrols the streets in an HPD uniform. Now, subsequent to this, we did ask for information. We said Freedom of Information Act request. We said, let us see the autopsy, but the city has suppressed it. Let us see the police report, but the city has suppressed it. Let us see some of the witness statements. The city has suppressed it. Let us see some information relative to your excessive force policies, your use of deadly force. Show us what you show your officers. And yet they refused to give us all of that information. So today we filed our lawsuit against the city of Houston to provide justice for the family of John Barnes, but in addition, to provide some accountability to the city and to get some policies changed so that they don't suppress information, so that they have some sort of oversight, and that they discipline police officers such as Officer Gardiner, who is a repeat offender, who is a time bomb waiting to go off, who has gone off now multiple times on unarmed citizens. I'll turn it over to Randy Kallinen.
Thank you. The city of Houston has completely failed in reining in excessive force by its officers. Ryan Gardiner in 2007 had already amassed 14 tasings with absolutely no discipline. He now has discharged his firearm 3 times. Nationwide, he would be one of the leaders. And he doesn't even have 10 years on the force yet. What has the city of Houston done? They have covered it up. That's their response. IED reports, secret. Incident reports, secret. Autopsy reports, secret. Video tapes and other cases, secret. There is absolutely no accountability by the city of Houston to prevent excessive force. We've seen in the Chad Hawley video how the officers with impunity in mass kicked, punched, beat Chad Hawley, who was laying on the ground, who had put his hands behind the back, who was 15 years old, a small man, a small boy, and they beat him senseless with impunity. This case is about accountability by the city of Houston for completely failing the citizens in regards to preventing excessive force.